everybody. Before we jump into today's episode, we have two sponsors we want to say thank you to for supporting this show. The first one is Routine. You guys have heard me talk about Routine, honestly, back from the early days of the podcast, and it's still a product I use every single morning. They have a prompt for me here. I'm going to do a little impromptu on this ad read today because honestly, this is a product that I truly believe in. And so I'm just going to tell you guys exactly what I think and why. First and foremost, this is a stat that they shared, but when you sleep, you lose between a pound and a half of water. And most of that's just sweating while you sleep. I used to not know if that was actually true, to be honest. I felt like a pound to a pound and a half of water seemed like quite a bit while I slept. But the one thing I did constantly pay attention to when I started using Routine was just the fact that before using Routine, I always felt a little dehydrated in the morning. And I'm one of those people that when I get up really early usually. I work out. One of the first things I do is some form of fitness. It's just like what I do before everyone's awake. And so it's very easy for me to grab a coffee, pre-workout, an energy drink, something with caffeine in it, and just go. When I am good about using Routine, first, I basically they come in these little single serve packets. They contain half an organic lemon, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, Himalayan sea salt, all 6 essential electrolytes, and they have no sugar in them at all. A lot of hydration products are going to have sugar. So one of the things about Routine that I love is that there's no sugar in there. So when I am good about doing this consistently, I will take one of those single serve packets, I'll throw it in my mixer bottle, and whether I also put in a pre-workout or something with caffeine or I just drink that separately, I try to drink that first. And the days I do that, I do genuinely feel hydrated and just have a different form of clarity all morning. A lot of people have tried to make their own homemade versions of Routine, right? You see people they take a shot of the apple cider vinegar, they put a little sea salt, a little lemon in a drink. This is essentially that, but in a product that you can take with you on the go, have it ready for you first thing in the morning. I know me personally, when I'm groggy rolling out of bed, the last thing I want to do is, squeeze a lemon, cut lemons up, go get the apple cider vinegar, find my sea salt. I just rip this packet open, throw it in my water, drink it, and it's good to go. You can try yours today. If you haven't tried it yet and you've been listening to this podcast for years, just try the damn Routine. Give it a shot. You can use code ShaneWhite30 and get 30% off your first order. So you get 30% off by using code ShaneWhite30 and go to yourroutine.com. To make it even easier, I've added the link to yourroutine.com in the show notes. So just click on the show notes for this episode, click on the link to yourroutine.com, and don't forget to use code ShaneWhite30. All right, guys, today's episode is also brought to you by NeuroRoast. Again, I'm going to go a little off script here. NeuroRoast is a product that I also came across during this year of 2023. They are a coffee company that's helping you optimize your brain function and overall well-being. This is another product that, to be honest with you, when I first started working with it, I was a little on the fence. I was like, do I really want to have mushrooms in my coffee? Well, folks, I will tell you, when I use NeuroRoast, one of the things that has stood out to me the most is I'll back up. People that know me know that I have way too much caffeine, typically. One of the things this year I've done a good job of is cutting out alcohol. Not completely, but predominantly, I don't touch a lot of alcohol anymore. What I think I've actually done the other way, though, is add a lot more caffeine. So I do definitely drink too much caffeine. That's something I need to work on next year, is to try to minimize how much of that. But NeuroRoast is something that has actually helped me because of the way they've formulated their coffee. Like, unlike regular coffee, which is, still something I consume, but NeuroRoast specifically doesn't cause jitters or crashes. Mushroom coffee provides more balance and sustained energy, allowing you to stay focused and productive throughout the day. So the times I do use NeuroRoast, I'll be honest, I just don't feel that jittery, like, I'm jumping out of my chair or standing here at my desk jumping around feeling. So give NeuroRoast a try. They have some really good flavors. I'll be honest too, the two guys that started NeuroRoast are just really good dudes based out of New York, and they're hustling, and hopefully they can get some people to try NeuroRoast this holiday season by listening to this podcast. So for you folks who've been on the fence, I'm telling you, it tastes delicious. They've done a fantastic job of making this coffee not only be functional, but taste fantastic. And if you want to try NeuroRoast, you can use code ShaneWhite. So it's super simple, just ShaneWhite at checkout. you'll also get 30% off. So if you go to neuroroast.com, and once again, I have added that to the show notes. So just click into the show notes while you're listening to this episode. You can click on NeuroRoast link directly. Don't forget to use code just Shane White, and you'll get 30% off your order. Hope you guys love both these products. I'm trying to not only bring you guys products that I use, but that I believe in on the podcast. I'm not taking ad reads for any brands that I don't really believe in. So anyway, hope you guys love both those products, yourroutine.com and neuroroast.com. I've added those links to the show notes. I hope you guys love it. And I got an awesome guest coming up right after this. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Shane White Show. I'm pumped today. Got my buddy Paul Sorbo on the podcast. Paul, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Thanks for having me, bud.
You've been on my short list for a long time. I always bug you about getting on here, and you're a hard man tie down. You're only doing 17 business endeavors at a time. So thank you for taking the time. Without further ado, though, everyone listening who doesn't know who Paul is, would you mind giving everyone just a quick intro to you? And you don't have to give everything you're working on if you don't want to. We can dive into all that.
We'll make it nice and simple and concise.
Yeah, just a quick intro.
Chronic entrepreneur, or serial entrepreneur, for lack of a better term. Mostly in the health and wellness space, all the way from medical technology to kind of supplements to kind of human optimization as a whole. I've been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember. Wanted to be a neurologist or orthopedic surgeon, which we can go into later. But I wasn't a good high school student. I think I graduated with a 2.2 or 2.6. Wasn't overly great, so it makes it a little bit harder to get into good, qualifying schools.
Yeah, for sure.
Ended up in Grand Junction, Colorado. Had a great time up there at Colorado Mesa University. Kind of turned my academic career around. So the plan was to go to medical school, but when I got into college, my parents were going through bankruptcy, or they had just kind of gone through bankruptcy. So college was kind of on me. So I went and got a job at a couple different places, Wells Fargo, you name it. Ended up at a sports nutrition store called Complete Nutrition up there. And literally, like a couple weeks after I started, owner emails all of us and he was like, "Hey guys, store's closing. It's not cash flowing. We got to figure this out." And I emailed him back basically like, "Hey man, I really need this job. I got to pay rent. What can I do to keep this place open?" And basically ended up firing the store manager. My best friend had got me the job. He ended up moving on, going to a different place, and basically was like, "Here's the keys to the kingdom. You got 3 months to hopefully turn it around." Called one of my best friends that was living in Castro. I was like, "Hey man, you want to come run this supplement store with me?" He moved up the next week. Like just out of the blue. Oh yeah. And we just ran it. We were profitable in 3 months. We were the #1 store in the country 8 months later. And then we opened up like 20 locations over the following 4 years. All the way from...
Was that the first Complete Nutrition?
It was the first franchise location ever. So that was the first franchise location that wasn't a corporate store.
Wow.
And then throughout that journey, we grew. I mean, we had 330 locations around the U.S. I got involved in product development, corporate operations, corporate franchising. But we kind of different partners came in and out. But we kind of specialized in overhauling, underperforming stores. So I had 4 stores in Illinois with a mentor of mine. We had stores in Vegas. We had stores in Denver. I was traveling exorbitant amounts. Meanwhile, still going to school because I was like, I'm still going to be a doctor. Ended up taking the MCAT, passed the MCAT. I got a great score on the MCAT, and then just decided I was like, medical school is not for me. I had a long sit-down conversation with a great uncle of mine who owns a massive medical practice, and he was like, "All right, man, you don't really do well with authority. You don't really enjoy school. You have some, you kind of like to swim in your own lane. That is not what being a doctor in this country is." I was like, "Oh, you're probably right." So decided not to go to medical school, and I just kind of kept going down that pathway.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, it's amazing, right? Some of these conversations we have as young adults where we're trying to decide our whole entire future, like how decisive that was, and probably knowing you now, like what a good decision that was, because obviously I could not see you in a million years just going down that path of following that at all. No way.
Yeah.
No way. Wait, it's so interesting. I think we've talked about this over coffee. One of those stores where I went to Purdue, there was one out in Lafayette, Indiana, where I was. And it was like it was definitely at the time like
New
it felt like a
concept.
startup
Yeah.
type nutrition store.
It
And I
was
remember the guys would come on campus and they needed people to. It was like it felt like that same story that I'm hearing you talk about,
It was
which
a
is really
high-end
interesting.
GNC, dude. I mean, it was
Yeah.
really it was a great business model at the time. There's a lot of things that ended up leading to its demise. But I got to cut my cloth learning on someone else's dime. It was kind of a step into entrepreneurship without it being a full entrepreneur. Got me into the industry that I'm in today. Like I would not be where I'm at without those first steps. I ended up learning some really hard lessons, owing a whole bunch of money to the IRS, all the good things. But yeah, I mean, it was a great business model for the time that it was. And that's when that was before the Amazon days. That was before online shopping. That was really the things that you could. I mean, dude, we had sale weekends where we would do $100,000 weekends, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's where people went as a resource for supplements.
I remember, it's funny. I'll tell the story very quickly. I remember if my buddy listens to this, he ended up being my roommate the next couple of years. But the freshman year, we were in a dorm, and I don't know if he was a manager at the store or what he was. There was this guy named Tim. I still remember his name, and he was this just fucking yoked guy.
I know exactly who he was.
Do you actually?
I do.
We called him Tim. He had a nickname for him, but that's really funny. If you actually knew this guy, that
absolutely.
Would be
I know the owner of the store that was out there.
Oh, that's so funny, Paul. What a small world, dude. You and I keep making these weird connections. He would come by, he would like walk around the dorms, and he just like stopped us one day and handed us a flyer, and we were like, "Oh yeah, we've been out to that store before." And he's like, "If you guys can hand out these, if I just come here once a week and give you guys this like big old thing of flyers and you hand them out, you guys can come get like free. I'll give you like a free pre-workout every month or something." It was something like that cheap. And we were like, "Oh, hell yeah. Like, let's do it." And I remember we spent so much time just like walking up and down the floors, like handing these out to guys. And I'm thinking back, I've never even gone full circle on that story before. And I'm like, wait, we just like, think how much money that probably drove to that store. And we got one thing of pre-workout.
Dude, so I launched this program back in the day. It was a referral program that I beta tested in Grand Junction, Colorado. And for every new customer that would come in, I would give you $10 of store credit. And every person that came in, I was like, hey, I would send out these handwritten thank you notes for your first time ever coming into the store. So all of our employees were writing handwritten thank you notes. Like they had a list and it had to go out that day. Right. And then we would send them through the mail. And then I had this whole referral program where I would include referral tickets. And it was $10 of store credit. You would write your name on the back of it. And then I would literally keep them going. And then I started announcing like people that would hit certain thresholds on social media. Dude, we went viral on social media. My store manager and I, like best friend of mine, before going viral was a thing. Like we started doing Monday Madness giveaways and we would announce like store credit people. We would announce the referral program and then we would do these stupid social media giveaways. There were points where I was going through the DIA airport away from Grand Junction where people were like, dude, you're the complete nutrition guy.
Really?
We got a cease and assist from Disney because we did a recreation of Frozen for giving away supplements. And it blew up like hundreds of thousands of views on Facebook overnight. And it was like my store manager and I in a tutu, like knocking on the door. We recreated the whole thing and we got a cease and assist because we had the Frozen soundtrack going in the back.
Well, that's amazing.
So complete nutrition.
That was back like right when Instagram launched too, right? Like that was like right in the beginning. Yeah.
It was the beginning days of Instagram. We were still doing everything on Facebook.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was literally in college or just getting out of college when you're doing all this. So this is nuts to think back to.
It was.
That's cool though, man. Cause I mean, just to kind of come full circle on that, like that just speaks to you though, as an entrepreneur. Like at the time, like with your back up against the wall, that'd been an easy time to complain, mope. And you were just like, now I'm gonna roll my sleeves up and try to make something work. I guess one important thing for people listening, though, Paul, was supplements and that whole industry. Was that something you were like really genuinely interested in when you took that job? Or
no, I mean, dude,
was
I was just looking for a job. I was working as a bank teller, hated it, right?
Wow. Okay.
And I was super interested in bodybuilding. Best friend of mine that I went up to college with was somewhat of an amateur bodybuilder, and I was like obsessed with getting huge. Like, so I graduated high school at like 135 pounds, maybe 140.
No way. Did you really?
Dude, have I ever showed you? I'll show you pictures one day.
I've seen the blonde hair pics.
Being like, just could not put on weight. And then I got obsessed. Like I've always been obsessed with the human body. But I started taking pro hormones and this and that and creatine. And like my freshman year of college, I probably went up at like $145 and I came home 7 months later at 215.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I put on like just under
your family
80 pounds in like 7 months.
Whoa. I will say, Tim, good old Tim, he did get me and my roommate on that was my first pro hormone I ever took, and it worked for what I don't know, whatever it was we took. If Andrew listens to this, he'll laugh because we both remember like our numbers on bench. We were like, this doesn't make no sense. Like, why do we look big? Numbers are going up, but then as soon as you stop taking them, it was like a deflating balloon.
It was awful. They were so bad for you too. Like honestly,
Yeah, sure.
I look back and I'm like, that was just oral steroids, but worse, so much more toxic.
Oh, I never thought about like going back. I mean, I don't have the bottle anymore. I'd have to remember what it was, but you probably know. We always had the running joke. We were like, I bet we're not gonna be able to have kids. Luckily, we both have. So
You're good. You're good. You know,
yeah,
I had a full circle moment over the last 4 years now that I have a daughter, you know, fertility issues, trying to learn that whole thing. I'm like, oh, I probably should have paid more attention to some of this shit I did.
Yeah, we were just like randomly taking a pro hormone off the shelf. Yeah,
So stupid. I was just on a podcast with a good buddy of mine. He owns a skincare brand called Young Goose, which I still owe you the introduction for, by the way.
I'd love to meet him. Yeah, Young Goose, like that.
We're like, I have a firm belief that the first biohackers were bodybuilders. Like, I genuinely, like bodybuilders were the first people that were playing with hormones, peptides, all that kind of stuff, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like this new peptide craze, I'm sitting there laughing my ass off because I'm like, we've been playing with IGF. Bodybuilders have been playing with IGF, growth hormone, everything for the last 2 decades. This is
sure.
Nothing
yeah, I was gonna
new.
say that's not new, right? Yeah.
Now everyone's like, oh, cool. This is not, this taboo subject. Everyone's like on TRT. I'm like, I started.
What do you think all these bodybuilders have been doing?
A decade ago, right? Like before it was all taboo. Like most of the really, really good stuff. Like most of the original information was on bodybuilding forums, and it was just
like bodybuilding.com and all those sites.
Dude, that's where a lot of this initial information came from, because it was just guys going out being like, here's my stack, here's what I'm noticing, here's how things are aromatizing in my body, here's how my labs are, here's what this looks like. And that's where a lot of this initial research came from, was just dudes being like, I want to get huge.
Yeah, no, I lived that for sure. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I remember being on, it's funny. And this is just a life lesson in general, because I think a lot of guys that get obsessed with aesthetics do this. I remember me and my buddies, we would spend all the time in the world reviewing all the different workout programs, like just obsessive over the workout programs and tracking, but like not the nutrition, not the supplementation. And now thinking back, you're like, dude, you were looking at like the tip of the spear. Like you didn't touch any of the pyramid at all of what probably would have actually helped. But yeah, you're like, if you probably just ate better, took some TRT and lifted half as much, you would have been twice the size probably.
I mean, there were times I don't regret anything. There's no regrets. I mean, I probably got up to like 250, 255, probably at my biggest.
Did you really? You were 250?
Dude, I was massive.
You gotta send me some pictures. I gotta see some pictures of this at some point.
If you go back on like old school Instagram of mine, there's like pictures of me that I don't even look like the same human. No beard.
I can't imagine 250 on your frame.
Oh, it was a lot of weight.
You would have had to just.
It was a lot of weight. It was a lot of fluff. I mean, dude, I would go into the gym. We'd go into the gym and like we worked legs 3 times a week, right? Like when I started squatting, I couldn't squat through like 135. Couldn't do it. By the end of it, most of this was steroid induced, by the way, if we're just going to be real about it, not natural. But there were times that we were doing like 495 drop sets. So we would we'd sit in the squat rack for like 4 hours. That's an exaggeration. But seriously, we're in the squat rack for probably an hour, hour and a half at the very, least. We would work our way up to like 495, and then we would do 495 for 8 to 12 reps, and we would immediately drop to 315 and just do that for as many reps as we possibly could. I think my record was like 33 reps as a drop set.
Jesus.
Right?
On the 315 on drop the 315,
set? After doing 495. I think about doing that nowadays, and I'm like, nope. Absolutely not. Couldn't even squat 315.
Oh, it's crazy, right? Now, do you think was a lot of that driven from steroid? Like, if you would have kept on that steroid prescription all these years later, and is that like how much of it would you attribute to that versus just also how much you were consistently lifting?
I was eating a metric truckload, right? So like that's the number one thing is the food. I was eating probably 7,000 to 10,000 calories a day.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I think I told you this. Like I've been consistently at like 2,500 to 2,700 a day. But I'm very lean.
Yeah, you're
even me trying to get like 3,500. I'm like,
dude, it's a full-time
7,000 to 10,000.
Oh, dude, I was eating 12 eggs every morning. I was eating a loaf of bread a day as like peanut butter and jellies that I would take to class or like to work. I would end.
Were you just constantly eating?
Oh, like nonstop. Nonstop. And then like, I mean,
And
dude,
just
we would
probably
just,
full and
dude, you feel terrible. Our buddies
did
worked at
you
Chipotle.
couldn't have oh,
So we would just like
said
go over, it was right
burritos
next to
and
my store. So I'd walk over to Chipotle. I would get like a double scoop of rice and chicken, a side of chicken, and it was like $2.25.
yeah.
So like we would just eat nonstop Chipotle, so much sodium, which is fine.
So much. Yeah.
But like, and then I would end every night. Like I would drink a carton of egg whites twice a day with as a protein shake. Like I would put protein in it, egg whites, and then whatever else. And then we would end the night with like a pint of Ben and Jerry's.
How many grams of protein do you think you were getting out of that?
350 to 400.
Damn.
Oh, just
Yeah.
so
And
much
a ton of carbs.
GI distress. Like I think about it nowadays.
Did you sleep like shit too? Yeah,
I've
I
always
slept horribly.
slept.
That surprises me too. Like we'll get into it, but I'm shocked that's. I figured you would have that so nailed in. That would be like your superpower. No.
I'm the opposite.
But it's hard to turn our brains off. I think when you're running stuff and trying to build things, that's the hardest thing. Is like you're so excited about what you're working on. It's such a different thing than people who are not excited. It's just you love it. It's not
there's
even
always
like
a
work.
fire to put out, or there's always something to be building, or there's always whatever it is. Like there's just
Sure.
I don't turn my brain off. I know you're the same. I sit up
it's
at night,
impossible
I'm like,
to. But
here's the 84 things that I should be doing right now with my time.
I'm
I
sure.
think sleep's a waste of time.
Were you that way back then when you're eating that much though?
I was that way my whole life as a kid.
Yeah.
I've never slept.
You must have slept horrible if you had that brain and that many like I can't. That's just. Sometimes it's like almost like you're going into a coma, I guess, when you have that much food.
Dude, I was waking up in the middle of the night to drink a protein shake and eat a PB&J or like.
Jesus,
dude.
Oh, dude, were you really? At that time, were you trying to compete in bodybuilding?
No, I just did it for the hell of it. All my friends were competing, and they were like, "Oh, dude, you should compete." I'm like, "No, I just want to be huge."
Now the next question, because I found this funny as I've reflected on my life. I would definitely wasn't to that degree, but we were kind of trying. I would call it more like just the classic dirty bulking. Like I was just eating anything and everything. Yeah. There was no like measuring or no focus on protein. But then like Thursday through Saturday, it was just booze-a-thon. Like, I mean, I'm like, what do you think is going to happen? Then you think you have 3 days, 4 days back on of being clean, and then you're just going to, I mean, it's just so funny to think back to that age and what the goal was.
It's so,
in reality, I'm like, what do you think drinking from, I know, what do you think drinking from 6 p.m. till 3 a.m. 3 nights in a row does?
Great extra calories.
Yeah, it's just extra calories.
Just extra calories. Is it good for gains? No, not by any stretch. Like,
yeah.
I never drank.
It's like, why do I feel so weak on Monday? What the fuck?
It's strange. So weird.
But you didn't drink back then?
I did, but not very much. Like, dude, I've never been. The funny part is like in college, I never drank very much. Like,
funny.
It just was not like I did a little bit. I never drank until I had gotten to college. I didn't drink in high school. I didn't do any of that. Like, and then I got to college. I drank a little, but I was never really into alcohol. And then when I got into the business world, I was like, oh, this is fun as shit, right? So like we'd go out to dinner and we would get cocktails or whatever else. But like I didn't start like drinking until probably like my last couple years of college. Like,
wow, okay. Yeah.
It was more like when traveling started happening. But like I also never had the negative benefit or the negative side of drinking. Like I don't get hangovers.
Yeah, you say you don't get hungover, right?
Never have. And I can drink until I'm
You've literally never had a hangover.
Never. Not one.
Oh. I wonder, do you think it could be from just some of the things that you've like, because you're so much into longevity, I feel like you take enough supplements and you're healthy enough. No?
It's a genetic predisposition.
Okay. See, it's funny. Sorry, go for it.
I was going to say, so Hugh Berman has a podcast about it. There's about 8% of the population, mostly Scandinavians, where you actually metabolize alcohol substantially faster than most of the normal population. It's also dopageneric in our brains. So like my dad has the same thing.
What's that mean?
It actually, so most of the time what happens is people just drink and it kills the dopamine production in your brain. So like they black out and they just shut down, like they just fall the fuck asleep, right? Like it's that blackout, like done, right? In my brain, it's the opposite. It increases the production of dopamine. And it's just like it's nonstop. So I'm the person that can drink and function all night. But then on the reverse side of that, I metabolize alcohol so fast. And I went and had all the genetic testing, all the methylation testing done. There's an enzyme called co-alcohol enzyme A, and I produce like 8 times the normal amount. right?
Oh, so you know this? Like you've
Oh
got
yeah,
blood
I mean,
tests
I
done to
went and
actually
did
figure
all.
this out.
My dad and I have the same exact genetic makeup for it, and so like my dad doesn't really get drunk, and he's never really had too many hangovers. He's almost 65 this year, and like just can. I mean, dude, like Christmas Eve, we'll kill 5, 6, 7 bottles of wine. Not that you should do that, right? But like that's kind of what we do every year. Is like we just open these stupid ass bottles of wine, and it's like him and I will be up till like 1 or 2 in the morning, just like, oh, this is a good bottle of wine. Everyone else is just like sawing logs. We'll wake up the next morning. We're good for Christmas. Yeah, it's a whole.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. Like you and me couldn't be more opposite. I have like the first, yeah, like I was famous for so long of being the one that just like falls asleep like mid dinner. Like there was a picture with my in-laws. We were like, there's a place here in Chicago that has the world's best margaritas and the strongest. And there's like a famous picture of me, like I fell asleep behind my sister-in-law in the car on the way home. I'm like literally like sliding down the seat behind her, and they're taking a video, and it's like a running joke in the family.
I love that so
So
much.
I'm the opposite. But you know what's funny? Like I think I told you this. Like I feel like I might. I don't. I'm. This is going off of no information. I feel like I'm that way with caffeine. Funny enough, like that's not. This sounds horrible. But like I could have. I mean, I'm drinking a Ghost right now. I could have 2 ghosts at 8 o'clock and go to bed at 10.
Yeah, but you're also
And I feel.
neurodivergent.
What's that mean?
ADD, sir.
Yes.
Yeah,
You know this. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
caffeine,
Yes.
yeah, similar to Adderall, similar to any stimulant, works different in your brain. Same as it works in
Yeah.
my brain.
Right.
I have a double shot of espresso at 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh, I'm ready for bed, right? Most people, caffeine does not do that. It's all about your ligated dopamine channels. So
Okay. Is that something you can test?
Yeah.
We're just like jumping right into this. Is that's something you can actually like go get tested for and figure out if okay.
For sure, yeah. So
Well,
it's
I'll
why
have to do that.
Adderall's an amphetamine, right? So it works on how dopamine actually is re-uptook in the brain. And so your brain, there's a dopamine dependency, right? That is an issue with that channel or that production.
Right.
Which is why you struggle to stay focused on any individual task, because your brain is always like, cool, squirrel, 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 squirrel. When you add stimulants in, it allows for that process to work more normative. That's really layman terms. Like we're not going scientific.
Oh, but that makes a ton of sense though. That's exactly how I feel. Like I've told you this before. Sometimes I feel like I'm over caffeinating myself, but it's like when I'm caffeinated, I feel more focused in a weird way.
Of course.
Like I don't feel jittery. I actually feel like
it calms you down. Yeah, so there's some recreational drugs that people sometimes take when you're ADD, ADHD, and you take those recreational drugs. It does the same thing as Adderall. You're not like, cool, this is awesome. You're like, oh wow, this is nice.
Yeah. Like I'm calm. I can get stuff done today.
That's how Adderall works. That's how Vyvanse works. That's why people take stimulants. I mean, it's a real thing. I also think that being neurodivergent is a superpower if you use it appropriately. Like I could not do what I do if I wasn't, I don't know if I necessarily believe in ADHD, but if I was not neurodivergent, I can't run 7 companies.
Sure. Yeah.
I have
100%.
to be able to pivot at any given time because there's always something else to be focusing.
Right. Yeah, I've felt that way recently. I had someone ask me, a friend who just works for a company, like they've worked for the same company for a long time, and they were asking, they're like, running an agency, how do you bounce from like one thing here to a totally different type of task with a different client? I'm like, I don't know. I actually feel like it's way more natural for me than it ever was to be at one company working on one set of things. I actually feel like it's easier for me. Like I have like fresh, my every day looks different.
Not everybody is that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had never thought about it because I've always said, I'm like, I think I do better. And that makes a lot of sense. It's probably just the way my brain works. Wild. Okay. Well, I love how we just dove right into that, because for everyone listening who's like, how the fuck did you guys get over here from Complete Nutrition? Paul is a guy who I've always, since I've met him, he knows so much about health, longevity, all sorts of things when it comes to health and wellness. Paul, I always go to, he knows this, but for everyone listening, I always go to Paul when I have a random question, or if I want to get huge. That's a conversation in a text thread currently we've been talking about. So it's funny that Paul's hitting on that. He's like, yeah, but you're 33 with 2 kids. Why are you worried?
Why do you really want to be huge?
Yeah.
I think the goals are different.
I don't know. Hold up.
Let me add a little context to that. It's A, from a passion perspective. B, I got very involved in the regenerative medicine space about 6 years ago. So I sit on the board, and I'm also acting VP of sales for a company called Wavi Medical, which is a medical brain scanning device, right? So basically we take portable EEG, and you're able to do a full clinical EEG in 4 to 10 minutes. It's super fast. So I do a lot of work in the
cool. I didn't know
space,
that's how that works.
Concierge space. We do a lot with traumatic brain injuries. I came across.
Does it even do like? This is probably, you're probably gonna be like, what a dumb analogy, but it's what it is. Do you know who Dr. Amen is, or Amen?
Of course.
I've seen a bunch of his stuff. When he talks about getting whatever that brain scan is
So
that he always does with
similar technology, but different. So that's a QEEG. So that's looking at the state dependent markers. So it's looking at alpha, delta, beta, theta coherence networks, right? So your brain state is ever evolving. That's why it's called a state. So it's the frequency or the amplitude at which your brain is producing any one of those individual waves at any given time. Right. And so what we're looking at in kind of neuroscience is, is there a correlating trait of upregulated alpha with focus or this type of depression or PTSD or anxiety? Is there common brain states that we see with those individual conditions? That is more QEEG based. And I'll be honest, I'm not a fan, but I'm not overly a fan. I think there's a lot of overreach looking at causation and correlation and not really understanding the difference, right?
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
Like, I'll give you an example. Anxiety. I think anxiety is a state. It's not a trait. I believe that in my core, and I can dive more into that. WAVI is more of a functionality assessment, right? So it's more looking at the mitochondrial support for your cortex. So how much energy does your brain have to process information with, as well as how quickly does that actually process in the brain? It's a much more reliable baseline marker as far as a biomarker. It's more similar to like a blood pressure, but for your mitochondrial function of your brain. So if anything is impairing that, we see a decline in that cognitive processing capability. If anything is improving it, we see an uptick. Right? This could be lifestyle, this could be hyperbarics, it could be photobiomodulation, red light therapy, could be hormone therapy. There's a number of different things, right? It's another assessment for your brain in particular. So long story short, I had a ton of concussions when I was a kid. I was a competitive snowboarder growing up. I did mountain biking, downhill mountain biking.
Didn't know this.
I was just a child. I broke, more bones than you could ever imagine, right? I had a whole cabinet file at the orthopedic surgeons. Part of that was my brain. And when I started with WAVI, I had a really, 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 really bad concussion when I was 15-ish. And borderline probably traumatic brain injury, borderline, right on that ballpark. And so when I had started with WAVI, one of the things that was super important to me was trying to kind of solve my brain fog, for lack of a better term. I had sold a minority stake, or we had sold a minority stake in one of our companies called Gomix, which is a packaging company. And I had some good capital that had come in from it. So I was starting to look into, stem cell therapy, exosomes, hyperbarics, like you name it. And I had a life mentor of mine call me. He was like, dude, before you do any of this, you need to go get a WAVI scan. I'm like, what the hell is WAVI? And all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, this can change the kind of landscape of brain care. All of a sudden I'm going to be able to say, oh, this is actually improving my cognition, or this is not. And it's allowing for personalization. So I jumped on board with WAVI like 6 years ago, and it's been
so awesome. Not only did you think, not only did you like the technology, but you were like, I want to get involved.
I didn't know that. I mean, it was like, this is the time that Kenzie and I are trying to revamp our financial landscape, trying to figure everything out. So I jumped on board with WAVI, and I've been a part of it ever since. So now I run most of the strategic partnerships for WAVI large scale. So we're implementing into clinics like Humanot, which is a functional wellness clinic that was started by Jim Donnelly, the founder of Restore. And so WAVI is the standalone diagnostic for all of their brain care. Their goal is to be 200 locations over the next 3 years. We're in Cenegenics Global. So that's kind of one of the founding principles of regenerative medicine. They've been around 20 years. And so we're the standalone cognition test for all of Cenegenics. And so I've been fortunate to get really involved in this space. I've been fortunate to speak on it and kind of be on panels, whether it's with Harvard or Hopkins or a lot of these regenerative medicine. I just got to speak at the Buck Institute out in San Francisco, the anti-aging center.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been this whole journey into health and wellness. And obviously, the rest of my portfolio is kind of synergistic with that. Just a really cool standpoint. It's led to different investments that I've made and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would love to get into WAVI, but I think an important piece for everyone listening is to back up. Because, Paul, you had the whole complete nutrition, I would call it like an overhaul, where you just jumped into the deep end, you helped them figure things out. It's funny. I don't know if you think of it this way, but you really did bring like almost like a millennial social media element to probably something that they weren't really focused on. That doesn't sound like, and I even remember back to that doesn't really seem like what they were focused on when I first met a lot of them. They were trying to just be another GNC with like cooler, younger people is the vibe I always felt when I went in there.
Yeah.
How did you go from that to what I think, most people who obviously don't know much about Gomix, but Gomix was like a huge part of your kind of like leaping off point into entrepreneurship. Let's go to Go Mix. I think that one for me when I first met you was such an interesting part of your story, which I think for everyone listening, maybe if you don't mind, just giving a quick overview of what is Go Mix, and we can chat through what happened.
So I was at Complete Nutrition. My wife and I, basically my partner had ended up selling. I thought that I had this 50% equity sitting in every store. I'm like, we're set. My partner.
Oh, wait, you ended up getting equity in Complete Nutrition?
I had it, but nothing was ever signed on legal document.
That's right. Yep,
this is the time that you're doing TurboTax or H&R Block all by yourself, and you could report a self, income, right? Like I have phantom equity, so I was writing off everything. I think that we're selling. The guy that ends up owning all the stores sells the stores. I'm like, I got a couple $1 million coming in. We're set for life. Shocker, I'm not set for life. Never signed any legal agreements. Never signed anything. So basically, the store's not worth anything for me.
Yeah, your name is not tied to anything.
There's nothing tied to it. Not only that, the IRS looks at my income statements and I get an audit letter. And I'm like, I'm getting audited. Well, it wasn't just 1 year, it was 5 years worth of taxes that I was getting audited for.
No.
Dude, I get hit with like 6 figures of tax penalties, right?
Yeah, I bet, because they're like, you didn't own any of this.
Oh,
you're writing things off all these
like,
years.
Where's the documentation for any of your deductions? I was like, well, actually, I was just a W-2 employee. And they're like, yeah, no, that's not how that works, right? And I'm like, oh,
shit.
So like, dude, I didn't know anything. I didn't know any better.
Yeah. Of course, you don't know.
Should have had legal documentation. Should have had equity agreements. Should have had partnership agreements. I should have had everything. Dude, I didn't even have an operating agreement. Right? There was nothing. Everything was handshake. So Kenzie and I, my wife at the time, we just got married. I got married at 23. I get hit with all of this audit, and I'm like, shit. So I end up calling a good friend of mine out in Salt Lake City, and I'm like, dude, I need a job. And he owned a company called Black Market Labs. Black Market Labs was this basically supplement company. It was a pre-workout company, for lack of a better term. And I end up flying out to become the director of R&D for them / sales rep. I get out there and the owner steps back into the business literally after a 3-year hiatus. And he basically is like, everyone's going to 100% commission. There's no base salary. There's no nothing. Good luck. So I'm making no money. My wife and I have just moved to Salt Lake. She's working as a, for lack of a better term, hostess at, what's the restaurant? Texas Roadhouse, server. And so we're surviving.
So you guys are like,
dude, like 13.
Not what we thought we moved here for.
Sweet. So in the meantime, we end up like, I'm trying to remember how it came across. A girl that I was friends with in high school ultimately ends up basically posting something on Facebook that was basically like, hey, my boyfriend started this packaging company, which he was trying to grow as a supplement company at the time. It was called Nitorp, which was protein spelled backwards.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Whole long story. I shoot him a message on Facebook and I'm like, hey man, I love your concept. I'm interested. We end up having a long conversation. I'm like, I think you're growing the business wrong. Like, I think there's a much bigger play. I think we should go patent this technology. And what we'll do is we'll go license this to larger brands. We have no capital. We have no nothing. He had just had a small stint with the Raiders. So long.
Like playing with the Raiders?
Yeah. So he played. So he was. Wow. He was fine with them. Never ended up going active. Wasn't really his passion. But long story short, I end up messaging him, and we have this conversation. We decide to move forward, and we end up becoming business partners. And so I sent out this mass email to like a whole bunch of industry veterans, basically like, "Hey, who wants samples?" Dude, we had no supply chain. We had no way of producing any units. And for people that aren't familiar, it's basically, we called it ready to mix technology. So take the principles of a ready to drink protein shake, take the water out of it, and it's just this stand up spout pouch with powder already in it that you add water to, shake, and consume.
Is it the package behind you on the shelf?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple of them actually. Oh,
yeah, there we go.
This is one of the brands that we made it for, right? So spout pouch, you just add water, shake it, and then you consume. So we called it ready to mix.
Sweet.
So we ended up basically creating the global IP for this, and we're sending out a whole bunch of different messages all over, like, who wants samples? Who wants samples? We were getting it produced in China. No way of filling, no way of getting powder, doing anything. And then all of a sudden, dude, you get interest from Cutler Nutrition guys, like all of these massive companies are like, this is a great idea. We'd love to interact with you. I'm like, well, shit, we can't produce anything. We've clearly blown our load too early. So I call a friend of mine, and I'm like, that I had done some manufacturing with in Salt Lake City. I was like, hey, I have a whole bunch of interest. Do you guys want to buy a machine? They end up buying this jankety ass $30,000 machine from China, but it's enough to get us a proof of concept. We're filling it through the spout. It's super inefficient. It just so happens that there's an innovation technology called Viva 5 that messages us back that's like, we'd like to license this technology from you. I know nothing about it. I've never heard of Viva 5. They're like, do you want to come out to Supply Side West, which is a massive trade show out in Vegas? And do you want to display your technology at our booth? Yeah, absolutely. Here's the problem. We're super broke. Dude, there ain't no money for nothing. So I pull out.
I was going to say, this is the story you were telling me.
Yeah. Pull out new credit cards, pull out everything. I'm like, fuck it, we'll do it all. Like, they're all secured credit cards. It's the only way I can get a flight. It's the only way that I can get a hotel. I book a hotel in Vegas, a Marriott off strip, under a GDY governmental rate that I just lied through my teeth when I checked in. They asked for my governmental ID. I was like, oh, it's actually a business partner of mine. We use his rate. Like, terrible. And we show up and we spend basically whatever we have left in life savings on sample units to get produced from China. Man. And Joe and I fly out to Vegas, and dude, we walk into Supply Side West. It's at Mandalay Bay, and it's this massive, massive trade show. And we walk up to this booth, and it's a 40 by 40. And I'm like, this thing's insane, right? Like,
and this is where you guys are going to put your stuff at.
$500,000 booth that Brian had put together, probably 250 actually. All of the event space. I'm like, I didn't know money like this existed. This is a whole different scale. We have this little 2x2 plexiglass box on the corner of the booth that we had produced like 10,000 samples for, right? And we just dump them in there, right? We're just dumping them.
Yeah.
Dude, we have a line the first day of the trade show, and people are like, this is the coolest thing. We're super interested. We talk to Herbalife. We talk to Dymatize. We talk to everybody. And we're like, people are ready to put in purchase orders. I can't make a unit.
We don't have anything.
Shit. So Dymatize, good friend of ours, was the director of R&D, was like, guys, I want to launch this with you. I want to have an exclusive license. We're talking to Redcon 1. And we need to do an NSF audit. We got to do all this stuff. Dude, this manufacturing facility, who I will love dearly for the rest of my life, was not NSF certified. They weren't quality certified at all. They were like GMP at the very late, like base minimum. So we can't pass anything. We're trying to figure out how we're going to make all this happen. We can't. Long story short, what we end up deciding is to launch in China first because Herbalife Global is interested. And we end up getting on a conference call through Brian Baer, who's my mentor and business partner nowadays, with Dr. Zhao, who's the president of all of Herbalife. And he was like, this is a novel concept. I think this is great. Our first moved like 30 million units. It was insane. And so those are all in China. We get a whole supply chain. We get a whole entity set up in China. We're setting up all of the IP, the licensing, everything. Long story short, we end up setting all that up. We launch with Herbalife China in March. Global shutdown for COVID happens April.
Oh, Jesus. Right.
But we had all the valuation of having China and Herbalife and 30 million units. So we end up selling a minority stake in Gomix to a large brand aggregator called Grove. Grove during COVID acquired 29 different brands. We were invested in Grove. It grew from 40 million a year to 880 million a year. It was insane. They're doing about 100 million in EBITDA. And then, kind of compounding through that, I was like, well, if Grove can do it, I'll do it. So I started buying my own brands, starting my own brands, doing Amazon sales. Now the portfolio.
So you've really, I mean, that part of the story I didn't really know. I mean, you had to flex and figure out a solution multiple times, dude. I didn't realize how many times you've had your back against the wall and you've had to just pivot.
You just problem solve.
Yeah, because even where you are now, like none of that stuff. It's crazy to think like when you started Gomix, like where you are now, the brands you're running and the channels you're selling in, that were like these are not things that you were doing back then. Like this is all. Whoa. Okay, I didn't even realize that. So Gomix, you kind of felt like you jumped. Do you feel now in hindsight, did you guys jump at the right time? Like for everyone listening to that story, I mean, COVID hits.
We were probably way too early in the market. I mean, I'm in the process of buying Gomix back and relaunching here in the States.
Oh, are you really? I didn't know this.
Yeah, I'm rebuying that back. But I mean, I think we were early to the market. We didn't have the right supply chain. We didn't have anything set up. But dude, you never do. When you're a young entrepreneur, you're like, I just got to make money. I got to find a way to do this. Right. I mean, this year alone, I mean, the good news is we're on a licensing structure in China. I think they sold 28 million units. Right. So like it's still a cash flowing business for us. We're great. I would like to get it here in the States, get that supply chain up and going. That's a whole different, concept. But now it's getting, every manufacturing machine that we do is $500,000. It's finding the right facility, the right partner, the right running up room. That's entrepreneurship. Like everyone thinks that there's this nuts and bolts, like you just get to live life on your terms. You're doing all that. No, dude, you end up working for your people. You are solving problems that you didn't ever know existed.
Yeah, right. 100%. Isn't that so true? It's the opposite. Instead of having one boss, you have tons. And just, yeah. Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah,
Like, it's like, if you need to get something done, go through Casey.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's like the running joke now. It's like, if we can't get a hold of you, just call her. Like, she'll know where he is.
Yeah.
We'll hunt him down.
But you just,
That's amazing.
you pivot, dude, and you find ways to make it happen. It's just, there's all of these things that I don't know, man. Like, when I got into Routine, which obviously is a wonderful growing company, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's an overnight success, right? Seeing the growth that we're seeing nowadays.
I could see that.
There's
People
4
think
years
that.
of history, 5 years of history that are there already.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I added a couple of key ingredients, I feel like. Not like actual ingredients, but like
For sure.
being able to drive the supply chain down, being able to, get manufacturing, be able to get our payment terms where they needed to be, which allowed cash to influx into the company, which then allowed us to grow to where we needed to be.
Right. Right.
But those boys have been problem solving for 4 years trying to keep that thing alive. And now we're growing by 800%, right? Sometimes it's strategic alignment with people. Sometimes it's different ingredients. Sometimes it's supply chain. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget in entrepreneurship is like, they just think it's about making sales, but it's really not about that. It's about solving the problem that's hindering your ability to do anything in the company or whatever that most common problem is. What is the number one risk?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, man, I totally agree. For you, and as you're saying that, and obviously you're naming off a few. Hop is another really good one. That Best Life for Pets. How have you felt like you've transitioned from focusing on something like GoMix, where at the time like you were all in full time, traveling, trying to get that off the ground, all the things you just mentioned, to now you have multiple businesses, and I think you have like a very specific specialty for each of those that you're kind of leading. How has your day-to-day changed, week to week changed, just from going from one to many?
It's all about the people for me. I think that's the most important thing ever is you have to have the right team to do anything. I think you can have the best idea in the world, and if you don't have the right team, you're never going to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. I can't do anything myself, right? Like I'm the limiting factor in most of my companies at this point, right? And so when you look at the bandwidth, right, how do I increase my bandwidth? I have to bring in people that are better than me at different individual insights, right? So like with Hop, could I go run Amazon on Hop by myself? Do I have the skill set to do that? Absolutely. Right. I have a whole bunch of people that I know. Most of my friends run, super successful Amazon businesses, 20, 30, $40 million a year in revenue. Could I partner? Could I? Yeah. Could I call them and say, hey, how do I do this? Right. Is that a good use of my time? Probably not. Right. I need to be able to find people that are experts in their individual field. Right. Partnering with you guys, doing stuff with people that you genuinely enjoy. I love showing up to work every day because it's interacting with teams that I love and we're creating something together, right? So now I can run the parts of the business that I probably have my best skill set in. And my skill set at this point is nurturing people. And so I nurture people to do the best that they can, each in their individual skill sets, whether that's with our creative, whether that's with our Amazon production, whether that's with this, whether it's with that. Like I need to make sure that every single one of those people is continuing to drive forward. That's what I do now. But I also can't do it for every company. So now it's Casey, right? So Casey is the project manager. Casey is the one holding me accountable to every single one of those things. When it was just GoMix, it was just hustle. It was how many people can we get in front of and how many samples can we send out and how do we find a way to get this done? Like, and quite frankly, I think there's also a lesson there of like not putting too many things on your plate. Sure. I got to the point where I said yes to too much and everything started to grow. And I was like, oh shit. Like
now I don't have time to do all
I don't have time for all of it. All of these things are growing. All of these things have teams. All of these things have either shareholders or debt or whatever else it is. And you're like,
sure.
Okay, how do I do this? And the reality of the fact is you can't do it all. And that's just the reality. Like there's a good book that I love. It's called Buy Back Your Time. And it's more about the personal side of things. And you and I have talked about it, right?
I'm rereading it.
Yep.
I'm reading a second time. I was telling Kyle, it's interesting reading it a second time. You just pick up on a lot of little things.
The gist of the book is beneficial. I think the actual implementation, right, is somewhat like yes and no.
You have to have a specific type of business, in my opinion, for that to work. Like you know what I mean? There's certain
service based that I think that it applies to. Like when he's talking, when you go through the concept of doing the exercise at your house, what are the things what's your hourly rate, right? Okay, the reality of the fact is I cook dinner, right? Am I really going to go hire a personal chef? Probably not. That's just not realistic, right?
Yeah.
Do I have a house cleaner? Absolutely. Right?
Yeah.
Because me spending 6 hours on cleaning my house, but I like having a clean environment, like that's not a good use of my time. But 100%. In business, it is something like it would take me 10 hours to try and film the creative, to do all this kind of stuff. Or I can pay someone that knows how to do that has the equipment, that has the skill set, right? That might cost me $2,500 on a monthly basis to do that. What is the time value of me trying to learn how to do that?
100%. That's the key right there. Things that you can outsource to be done better, faster, at a rate that makes sense, right?
You're just going to move.
I know we got 1 minute left, so I want to be cognizant of your time, Paul. I know you're a busy guy. Last question that I like to ask everyone on here, I want to make sure I squeeze in, is what tools do you put around you? And you've mentioned some of them, but to basically like plan out whether it's long-term or yearly goals, all the way down to what's the shit Paul's getting done today? Like, what's your system look like? Are you a pen and paper guy? Do you have apps? I know you basically have an assistant that helps you.
I'm a Casey.
What is your system?
I'm a I'm a Casey.
For everyone listening, Casey's his assistant, project manager. She's kind of like his go-to.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So she basically manages a lot of the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah. I've learned that my brain needs a task management system, but I've also learned that my brain doesn't do well with just sitting in front of Monday or Trello or whatever else it is, right? Because every company has a different list. Every company's got new stuff that it's got to be working on. So for me, what works best is having someone that I'm accountable to. Somebody that I don't want to let down. For me, that person is Casey. My personal assistant is the person that I work for, right? And Casey, it's my job to realize what are the things that are the most important versus what are the things that are not that important. But it's also my job to communicate to Casey everything that needs to happen at any given time. Here's the travel that needs to happen over the next quarter. Here's what I need this. Here's what needs to happen under routine. Here's the tasks that need to happen. Here's what I need to complete. Then on a weekly basis, every single day, we're going through that list and I'm checking off the things that are the most important things. And that's what you have to get good at, right? Or in my opinion, that's what I've had to get good at, is realizing what are the actual things that are the most important.
Sure.
Because 100%. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
I live that way too, man. Yeah, it's so true. You got to have a system, whatever it works for you, to bubble everything up and strip away all the stuff that's noise.
You have to. And it's not saying that those things aren't important, but like even for me, I'm getting to the point where like buy back your time. The thing that I'm realizing is I don't need an hour-long meeting with people. I have a 15 to 30-minute block. My long meetings are 30 minutes, right? And what Kate does is she puts cliff notes in every single note on anything that I have so that when I'm logging into that meeting, I can overview the cliff notes, whatever the emails were, and I can go in and I know what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And then there's a recap, right? What are the action items coming out of that so that we know where we're moving next?
And making sure there's a cycle.
And not everything has to happen this week. If it's a meeting that I want to have, maybe it's next month. It's like, let's get on the calendar for 2-3 weeks from now.
Yeah. Love that, man. That's great. That's really good. Well, dude, I know we could talk forever. I'd love to do another one in the future. Like I said, before we hit record, we should do one in person. I'd love to have you for more than an hour. We can actually like sit back and get into some deep stuff. But thank you, man, for taking the time. I appreciate it. This has been phenomenal. It's cool to hear more and more of your story. And now we got to circle back. I got to circle back with Tim and figure out, wait a minute, you know Paul. So now.
Yeah, dude, I haven't seen it. I don't even know if he'd recognize
So funny.
Like, it's just like we ran into.
He wouldn't recognize me either. I was a kid.
Yeah. Corporate retreats, the whole shebang. There's so many synergies that you and I have. It's hysterical. It's all the people that we're related with. But that is a truth of as you continue to push and push and push, the people become smaller and smaller and smaller. And there is 3 degrees of separation between
everybody. All right, buddy. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Much love, brother. I appreciate your time.